Hello, my name is Marcella Hooks, and my presentation is on the Zodiac Killer, Criminal Justice, April 4th, 2015. Zodiac Killer. Beginning is an unknown assailant calling himself the Zodiac Killer that terrorized people in northern areas of California. The span of the murders were in 1968 and 1969. The attacker was responsible for 5 of the murders, it was 7 attacks. The Zodiac Killer, he killed in 1966. Her name was Bates, and he put on there on the desk that Bates had to die and there will be no more. But the evening of December of 1968, he shot and killed a couple in Vallejo, California. He also sent letters to the Vallejo Times in August of 1969, also to the San Francisco Chronicle and the San Francisco Examiner. In each letter, one had over 408 syllable cipher. That was decoded by a teacher from Salinas. In August 7th, 1969 was the first time the killer gave himself an identity known as the Zodiac Killer. He mailed the Zodiac Killer in 1969. He sent a code that contained 340 symbols, the heart of the code from the previous 3-part codes sent to the newspaper companies. He also, in 1969, he left a message on Hartel's car door, which included the dates of the 2 earlier assaults with murders. From the survivor, a sketch of the killer was created, and it was described. He was a heavy-set white male in his late 20s and 30s with short brown hair with a thick trim, glasses. He also wore a hood that looked like he was an executioner. He shot a taxi driver October 11th, only a few weeks after the Harold Shepard attack. And 2 days later, he wrote another letter taking credit for the murders. He also made threats about attacking a school bus and killing school children. An author of the Zodiac Killer named Lee Allen on the circumstantial evidence. The letter was typed with the same typewriter of the Zodiac Killer. He wore the same brand of wristwatch as the killer. He was suspected by close friends Don Chaney, later to be suspected as the murderer. The DNA profile was later included other murders. Attack patterns of the Zodiac Killer was using dark and secluded. It was usually in dark and secluded places where he would kill, and he would put his victims in compromising positions where they would trust the Zodiac Killer. Just watching the movie, I saw, as I was watching, he would wait until the couples would kind of like make out, and then he would come up to the vehicle, drive his vehicle in back of theirs with his light shining. Then he would come up to them and he would shoot them. He shot one of the young couples, Mike McGillen and Darlene Farron. McGillen survived the shooting, but Farron died at the scene. The Zodiac Killer will crack. Mostly investigated by local. The Zodiac Killer investigation mostly investigated by local and state police. He was wanted by the FBI, and they couldn't do too much about trying to find out who he was. The case was still remained unsolved, and the case had been put in inactive for ongoing investigation. Out of the 7 attacks, there were 2 survivors. Michael Renaud Magu was shot on July 4th, 1969. Brian Calvin Hartnell stabbed in the back 8 times on September 27th of 1969. A sketch was drawn to the survivors to help capture the Zodiac killer. There was also a movie that was made in 2007 based on the Zodiac killer. There are many books out made based on a series of events of the Zodiac killer. The San Francisco Chronicle, the editor received a letter from him telling him who the next killer was going to be, and then he was not going to give out his name, which he did. In the beginning of the Zodiac killer in August of 1969, the San Francisco Examiner struck again, choosing yet another young couple out of the remote area. He left the killer left a message. I'm repeating. The Zodiac killer returned to the highlights in 2014 after a new book, which was called The Most Dangerous Animal. The Zodiac killer went from 1968 to 69 unsolved. There were theories of today on who the Zodiac killer was. It was stated that it was his biological father was an infamous Zodiac killer. He was born in New Orleans. Stewart had abandoned as an infant and later adopted, and then he spent most of his time trying to track down his biological father. In a search to San Francisco, his biological father later had a criminal record. The man now deceased also was the police sketch of the killer. According to the CNN, Stewart identified his father as Earl Van Best Jr. Many people today still try to figure out the hardest cipher constructed by the Zodiac killer. Books, movies, and TV shows have been made around these series of events. The case has been put on an active list to be solved. That's all I have on the Zodiac killer. How long is that?